Bryan Kohberger was allegedly able to stab 4 Idaho college students to death in just a few minutes, well, it's a big question for the prosecution to explain to the rest of us, specifically the jury, but some insight into his past may give us some clues. Turns out Kohberger knew how to use a knife. Bryan worked as a fish cutter. He was a fillet man when he was in high school, trained to cut and fillet raw fish. I know how to do it. Means you gotta know how to use a knife. We'll see how Kohberger was.
Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies starts now.
Oh my gosh, you guys, we have so much stuff to get into on the Idaho murder case. Law enforcement released more information on what they seized from Bryan's parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania home on November 30th, the day Bryan was arrested. They retrieved 2 knives, a Glock 22 with 3 magazines. They also seized a whole bunch of other stuff. We're going to talk about the 2 knives, the handgun. Why would he use a knife if he had a gun? We also know that Bryan had a job working as a fish cutter. Jennifer Coffindaffer broke the story. So was Bryan just more comfortable with a knife, or was this more nefarious? Several court documents that were released revealing the investigators took a number of items as evidence, including the knife, a pocket knife, the Glock, and 3 magazines, and also a criminal psychology book was seized from Bryan's father's and mother's house. So would Bryan have kept that K-bar knife used in the attack as a souvenir? Now remember, Bryan is innocent until proven guilty, but the affidavit also shows green leafy substances, and this is so interesting because it could just be something benign like green tea, or, and I'm watching my words here, it could be something used for medicinal purposes. So Bryan was supposed to be clean. Had he relapsed? We have all wondered if Bryan had been inside the 1122 King Road house prior to November 13th. So besides the 2 knives, one was described as a, quote, Smith & Wesson pocket knife. And then we have that Glock. So why would Bryan choose to use a knife over the Glock? I'm also going to discuss with you the significance of all of the items removed from the Hyundai Elantra. Let's get started. Everything I'm sharing with you today is my opinion, and opinions are not facts, so please don't send any negativity to anyone. Let's be kind and good to each other. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, share this in your chat rooms, and give this video a thumbs up so I know you were here. So why did Bryan use a knife? I'm going to address the note Bryan left addressed to his father in just a moment, because this reminds me of a couple of other cases. And first of all, I want to talk about this knife. So according to Dr. Burrell, a forensic psychologist in New York City, anytime someone wants to commit a murder or assault, either by choking, stabbing, or making bodily contact, it always speaks to the level of rage and perhaps a personal connection to the victim that using a gun does not. So this is really interesting. As I shared with you in the wound collector video, I do believe there was rage there. I do believe he was seething when he got there. He had been trying to reach out on Instagram. He had been liking all of Maddie's photos. He had been DMing at least 2 of the young women on Instagram. We don't know which 2. It could have been Xana and Maddie. It could have been Kaylee and Maddie. I do believe that Maddie was the target. So Dr. Burrell also says when you're stabbing someone, it's close and in your face, and the experience is more visceral, more graphic, more provocative. It speaks emotionality, whether rage or paranoia. Also found was a book with underlining on a specific page. What was on that page? And this related to what happened to Ethan, Xana, Kaylee, and Maddie. There was also a note written to Bryan's father, and I want to dig into this note because Bryan's father flew from Pennsylvania to Washington, and he drove back with Bryan. So was Bryan closer to his dad than his mom? This reminds me also of the note that Bryan Laundrie left in the Gabby Petito case. Bryan left behind a very self-serving note about his actions. The note also reminds me of when Chris Watts' father flew to Chris when a pregnant Shanann, Bella, and Cece went missing. Was Bryan closer to his father than his mother? And is this why we have this note addressed to him? And what does the note say? I'm also going to talk about multiple masks and gloves in just a moment, so please stay with me because this is really crazy. So law enforcement also found an Acer laptop, a white paper with password, black gloves, and several clothing items, many in black. It also shows that law enforcement seized multiple computers. So was Bryan even planning to return to Pullman, Washington after the holiday break, or was he planning to stay in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania? We also know the knife sheath that was found near Maddie on the bed and the DNA taken from the knife sheath matched Bryan's. Now, was this knife sheath left intentionally, or was it pulled off during the struggle and left behind by accident? And did Bryan, if he left it intentionally, he would have needed another bag to drop the knife he had just used into it as he left the 1122 King Road. Now let's talk about the black hat, the black mask, and then I want to dig into that car because it seems like they took the car apart. So the black hat, black mask were taken, as well as a number of items from his car. They took the door panel, seat cushions, headrest, seat belt, visor, brake, gas pedals, a Band-Aid, maps, documents, and other items. So among the other items they took were a phone. I talked about the black face masks, and they had several pairs of black gloves, dark clothing, dark boots. We also know that they did find that Van's shoe print. Did they find anything that matched that? So one of the surviving roommates stated she saw a man leaving in black clothing, a hat and mask, leaving her home on the night of November 13th. And her description of this man's eyebrows also matched Bryan's, in my opinion. So Bryan was arrested on December 30th of 2022 at his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, after a 6-week search for a suspect in this case. And it literally looks like they took the Hyundai Elantra apart, and I suspect they were looking for blood. So Bryan has not entered a plea. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty. So does this latest release show whether or not law enforcement has enough to convict Bryan? Subscribe